Trajan's Dacian Wars of the early 2nd century are one of the most famous conflicts of the Roman Empire. They left behind many material monuments and are widely reproduced in modern culture. What is the background of the Dacian Wars and who were the Dacians? Antique authors have no unified opinion on the origin of the Dacians. Roman authors called so living to the north of the Danube Getae. Both peoples were of related origin and spoke a common language of the Thracian group. The Greeks painted a more complex picture of Dacian ethnogenesis. According to Strabo, the Getae lived both on the northern and southern banks of the Danube. In this case, the Dacians were only one of the Gothic tribes, whose name was later transferred also to their neighbors. The territories where the Goths lived stretched from the Danube bend near modern Budapest eastward along the borders of the Hercynian forest to the foothills of the Carpathian Mountains, and then northward to the bank of the Dniester. The Getae also lived on the southern bank of the Danube up to the Balkan Mountains. Gothic settlements were fortified with ramparts and moats, located on elevated places or on the banks of rivers. In ancient times, the Getae lived in separate tribes, often fighting each other. We know that the Transdanubian Getae had their first political union, led by King Dromiche. He managed to defeat and capture Lysimachus, a prominent associate of Alexander the Great, but then released him for a large ransom. It is known that there lived another king of the Getae known to us by the name of Oral, who successfully fought against the Bastarnae and Celtic tribes of the Podunavia. Over time, the Getae became a powerful political force, whose importance was recognized not only beyond the Danube, but also in the entire Danubian region. The height of the power of the Getae was the reign of King Burebista. The exact dates of his life are unknown to us and are still a subject of debate among researchers. Antique authors claim that Burebista lived and ruled at the same time as Caesar and was even killed around the same time as him. Initially he was only one of many kings of the Getae, but thanks to successful plundering campaigns Burebista managed to create a powerful military coalition under his rule. His army numbered 200,000 warriors who were unconditionally loyal to their leader. The territories, subjected to his military raids, stretched westward to the upper Danube and southward to the borders of the Roman possessions in Macedonia and Thrace. His main opponents here were the Celts. Alarmed by the advance of the Goths into the Danube, the Romans gave military command in Illyria to Gaius Julius Caesar. Burebista, however, did not go further west, and so Caesar had to seek the laurels of military command in Gaul, rather than in the Danube, as might have been the case in another turn of events. Burebista himself at this time turned his weapons eastward, raiding the Greek colonies of the west coast of the Black Sea. Thanks to the Borysphenite speech of Dion Chrysostomus, the most detailed information is available about the Getae's attack on Olbia. Most of the inhabitants probably escaped, but the consequences of the barbarians' sacking of the city were felt for a long time afterwards. Many other cities along the coast suffered the same fate. The decree from Istria makes it possible to believe that this city, like Olbia, was subjected to destruction and sacking. Its inhabitants also had to abandon their possessions and flee. Having turned the city into ruins, the Getae soon returned to the interior of the country, in which they were complete masters. Odessus, Varna, was also ravaged. The stay of the Getae in the city was also temporary. The Goths tried to plunder Tomi, Constanza, from where the decree on the organization of extraordinary protection of the city due to the particularly difficult situation and danger that threatened its defense came. However, these extraordinary measures, and to an even greater extent, the presence of powerful defensive walls in Tomas contributed to the successful defense of the city. Further south, Mesembria, Nesabar, was attacked by the Goths, but its inhabitants also managed to defend their city. The Dionysopolitans were apparently on good terms with Burebista at this time. It is known that Dionysus' son Acornion made a trip on behalf of Burebista to Gnaeus Pompey the Great, asking him to recognize his royal title and status as an ally of the Roman people. The trip was successful, but the king of the Goths did not have long to enjoy his new status. Pompey was defeated by Caesar in the Battle of Pharsalus, fled from there to Egypt and was soon killed. Caesar himself treated Burebista quite differently, seeing in the newfound military power of the Getae a danger to the borders of the Balkan provinces. Therefore, after the end of the civil wars, one of the priority activities for Caesar was the preparation of a military campaign against the Goths. To this end, a large army was assembled in northern Italy, Epirus and Macedonia, totaling 16 legions and 10,000 horsemen. Only Caesar's sudden death prevented the start of the campaign. Burebista briefly outlived his adversary and was killed, like Caesar, by the daggers of the conspirators in the same year. After his death, the tribal alliance he had created was again broken into 4 parts. Traces of destruction on the fortresses erected during the reign of Burebista testify to the resumption of internecine warfare. After Burebista's death, the Goths no longer had a single ruler, but only individual chiefs. 2 of them are found in the sources, Catazone and Dicomes. Nothing is known about the latter except his name, while the evidence about Catazone is quite numerous. He ruled in the mountainous part of the country, in the territories of modern Banat and Ultinia. It is known that Caesar Octavian, in preparation for the war in Illyria, persistently sought the favor of Catazone, rumored even to offer the king his daughter Julia, and he himself intended to marry the king's daughter. The engagement fell apart, as did the consummation of the alliance. Catazone preferred to make terms with Mark Antony, to whom he had pledged his support. Alas, these promises also remained only lip service. While the Romans fought civil wars with each other, Catazone crossed the Danube every winter and plundered the Thracian lands. News of his raids reached Rome and was even reflected in the poetry of Horace. Annius Florus reports that when Augustus decided to put an end to the raids of the Getae, he sent there Gnaeus Cornelius Lentulus, who pushed them to the opposite bank, and on his bank of the Danube erected guard posts and left garrisons. The Roman conquest of the right bank of the Danube occurred during an expedition undertaken by the Macedonian governor Marcus Licinius Crassus. The reason for it was the invasion of the Bastarnae, who crossed the Danube, intending to seize the lands of Thracian allies of Rome. Having defeated the Bastarnae and personally defeated their king Dildon, the grandson of the victor Spartacus then conquered the tribes of Triballi and Mesa, who lived between the Balkans and the Danube. After that, the Roman commander intervened in the internecine strife of the Getae, who lived in the territory of Scythia Minor. Having supported one of the chiefs who ruled there, he subjugated the other 2 with his help, putting all of them in client dependence on Rome. At his demand, the Getae even had to return the banners they had seized from Antony of the Hebrides. Crassus celebrated the triumph in Rome. For some time after his campaign, peace was established in the eastern part of the lower Danube. However, not for long. The sources of this time again and again recall the Dacian threat, and Ovid, who was exiled in the year 8 in Tomes, constantly mentions the raids of the Getae and Sarmatians. In the course of the conquest of Pannonia, the Romans undertook a number of campaigns beyond the Danube, the exact dating of which has not yet been established. One of them is attested by an elogia from Tusculus. The text of the inscription is as follows: Marcus Vinicius, son of Publius, being sent beyond the Danube, defeated an army of Dacians and Bastarni, forcing these tribes to recognize the authority of the Roman people and Augustus Caesar. Behind the transparent to understand the meaning of the inscription are mysteries of the route and chronology of the campaign. It is known that Vinicius acted as governor of Illyricum and commanded in the Pannonian War, conquered the tribes living between the Sava and the Drava. Then he handed over the command in Illyricum to Marcus Agrippa and ruled Macedonia for some time. The order of enumeration of the tribes in the inscription falls into two parts. If the order of enumeration reflects the route of advancement of the Roman troops, then it began on the lower Danube and proceeded in the direction from east to west. If the campaign against the Bastarni and Dacians was undertaken separately, and among the pacified tribes in the first place or living in the territory of modern Slovakia Catenes, then in this case the Romans could come from Noric or Pannonia, and then move in an easterly direction. One more campaign of Roman armies beyond the Danube is recorded by an unknown author. This work was written by a poet of Ovid's circle and is dedicated to both sons of Livia, Drusus, who died in the Germanic lands, and Tiberius. It mentions the stay of Tiberius' troops beyond the Danube, when they reached Apollis, Alba Julia, lying at the edge of the universe. Finally, the inscription of Sextus Elias Cotta, consul, tells of the migration to the right bank of the Danube of 50,000 Goths, who were placed on the vacant lands of the Mazes and Tribals. Thus, Augustus in his memoirs could rightfully assert that in his reign the Danube became the border of the Roman people's possessions, and even the Dacians living on the other side of the river had to bear his power without complaint.